Two dicks, wow.
Yeah! Here we go! Here we go! Here we go!
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast.
And having to go, yeah, but he did kind of do this.
What I'm hearing is you just want Tom Brady dead. Like that's all I'm hearing at this point. You just want Brady
Well,
dead.
not anymore. He's retired now, so I'm good with that. I don't want him calling games anymore because holy hell, he's hard to listen to.
Enough angry and, depressing from myself. Sterling, thank you for being able to sit there as my therapist for this episode.
Start the game already!
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast. Brendan and Sterling coming at you for another week, and we are another week closer to the draft. We are officially 2 weeks out at this point before we get to Green Bay to have all of the sexy picks, and then we kind of have a few small things throughout the year, but then it really starts to get into those, okay, we're in the dead zone type period. But first off, Sterling, buddy, how you doing?
Doing good. Looking forward to the draft. It'd be nice to actually have some football news. I know these recordings we've been doing, it's been getting tougher and tougher to find stuff to talk about that's new, just because there's not a whole lot of new things going on right now.
Yeah, it is definitely a little bit. It hasn't been a crazy off season in terms of a lot of the breaking news type stuff. Again, we had a very large jump of stuff right as the new league year started. Obviously, with free agency, you're going to see a bunch of stuff. Haven't seen as many trades this offseason as well as we saw last offseason, where you'll see a handful of guys moving teams. But yeah, as we approach and get ready for this draft season, it is definitely, something. There's going to be a lot of questions that are going to be answered at this coming draft. And, today we ultimately thought to ourselves, there's probably 10 questions that need to be answered by the draft. And not all of them are necessarily this team. Like, what's this team going to do? It's questions like, how is this team going to affect this sort of situation? And a lot of those types of moves. And starting out with our first big question is, and this is one that we have been asking for weeks now, up to like a month and a half, pretty much since the season for the Pittsburgh Steelers end. What's their plan going to be at quarterback? And not only what is their plan going to be at quarterback, it's what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers, because the last real destination for Aaron Rodgers to go and try to be competitive is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, both of us have stated many, many times, we don't like the idea of Aaron Rodgers going to the Steelers. It doesn't make sense to us. We both think it's just going to be the same old hat, and it's just going to make things even more toxic than what it currently is. But you look at Rodgers and you go, if he doesn't sign with the Steelers, where does he go?
Right. And I mean, I've racked my brain on it, and there's really only one other team I can think of that he might land, but it requires them to make a big gamble with their draft, and it's not a competitive team. So he's really going in there and hoping to be able to carry them, and that's the Tennessee Titans. If the Titans aren't as sweet on board as everybody thinks, and they go, well, maybe we take Aaron Rodgers in, we trade away our first, drop back a little bit, get another first round pick next year or whenever, just to beef up that trade cap or that draft capital. And they write it out because, as we discussed, the Tennessee Titans aren't a quarterback away from winning anyway. So drafting a quarterback right now isn't necessarily the best move. You don't have enough other pieces in place. So by the time you get everything in place, then you've got to give this rookie quarterback his first real deal. And you don't know if he's truly the guy by that point because he hasn't had the weapons around him. And so that's the only other landing place I could really see for Aaron Rodgers at this point in time. And that's, again, only if the Tennessee Titans opt to gamble with their future. If he doesn't sign with the Steelers, I think he's going to be forced to retire.
Yeah, and the other big thing of why I don't think we're going to see Aaron Rodgers sign before the draft is we also have to remember teams with the compensation picks, where again, if you don't know what the comp picks are, it's additional picks that get added for certain teams from rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, just to basically give them the advantage of, okay, you lost this profile of a player, determines what round pick you get. And the Steelers right now, they're going to be getting 2 comp picks for losing both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. And by signing Aaron Rodgers now, that doesn't allow the Steelers to get one of those comp picks or compensatory picks going into next year. Now,
Yep.
once the Monday after the draft, any free agent that you sign afterwards does not go against the comps. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that a little bit later when it comes to some free agents. But if you're the Steelers, you know you have this comp pick situation of where you can get Aaron Rodgers. But you also have to be looking at this and going, Aaron Rodgers is 41 years old. He's playing okay football, but it's not the Aaron Rodgers. It's been so often where you have stated, if this was Aaron Rodgers 5 years ago, it would be the easiest no-brainer pick whatsoever. Bring him in. You don't care about the rest. That was when he was back-to-back MVP. It was hard to really not look at him and go like, yeah, that's an easy option for someone to try to bring in. But now, if you're the Steelers, you're looking at going like, he didn't have a great year last year with the Jets. I mean, like, his numbers were still pretty good, and you started to see a little bit more of that Aaron Rodgers down the stretch, but you weren't sitting back going like, that was a guy that was taking his team to the Super Bowl.
Well, yeah, I mean a lot of those stats, it was garbage time stats. Garbage time in the game and garbage time in the season. That's why he came on strong at the end of the year, because the Jets were limping along. Nobody was worried about them, and so they were able to score more points and put up better stats near the end in losing efforts still. And so yeah, he'll be able to pad his own stats, but he wasn't really going out there and winning games for the Jets like he did for years in Green Bay, where he was very much the reason that team was winning a lot of those games they won.
Yeah, and again, we won't see where Aaron Rodgers signs until after the draft at this point,
Mhm.
but it's going to be really, really telling that if on day number 1, the Steelers walk away with not drafting a quarterback, and even going into day number 2, if the Steelers don't make any move at trying to get themselves a quarterback, again, they only have a 3rd round pick on day number 2, so it's a little bit trickier to try to find someone. But even then, if the Steelers don't draft someone on day number 1, I would expect to see on Monday afternoon Aaron
Yep.
Rodgers signs with the Steelers. And if that's not the case, it continues to just go down. We're going to continue to have this conversation that I know you and I just absolutely love having every single week at this point.
Right? And I mean, I would say if they don't take a quarterback on day 1, then they will be signing Aaron Rodgers after the draft, would be my guess. If they don't take a quarterback with that first rounder, that's probably what's going to be happening. And last I saw, the Steelers actually have 4 comp picks this year, one in round 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Yep.
And so they've got 2 round 3 picks. It wouldn't shock me to see them maybe try to move up into the 2nd round to take a quarterback there if they feel like reaching on one in the 1st round is a little too spicy. They could go, we're going to grab a different position and need in the 1st round, one of the more talented options, trade up into the middle of the 2nd round using a bunch of the comp picks and other picks that we've got, and try to grab a Jackson Dart or a Quinn Ewers or Jalen Milroe in that spot instead.
Yeah, again, this question that we're going to ask, we've talked about this so much, so you can watch probably the last 3 weeks of our videos and have a pretty decent idea of kind of our thoughts on this one. So we won't spend a ton of time on this one, as we do have at least 9 more questions that are presented, are going to be should be filled out throughout this next one. In the question number 2, staying in the AFC North, it's, will the Bengals focus on their defense in this draft? Because you have spent so much on the offensive side of the ball. Your defense was so bad. I've been saying it personally ever since the season ended that if the Bengals come out here and spend every single draft pick that they have on defensive players, that means chances are you're getting 3 defensive starters and hopefully finding a diamond in the rough in the later rounds that can also be a starter or a valuable rotational guy into that defense and make that defense better, because at the end of the day, this draft and next draft for the Bengals should realistically be all defense if they want this competitive window that they have with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and the rest to really be successful.
It does have to be their focal point. I mean, you look at their offense, they spent money last offseason on offensive line. They got extra help in there to help protect Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's already got his big contract. They signed Jamar Chase and T. Higgins this offseason, spent a whole bunch of money there. Their offense is stacked. They've got a good running back there as well on a rookie deal that they don't have to worry about paying yet. You know, the tight end position's a little bit lacking, but they got some decent veterans that can, you know, be very versatile. It's that defense. You know, they have to just keep drafting defense because they now don't have the money to go out and bring in a big defensive player. They don't even really have the money to sign the one big defensive piece they have, and that's in Trey Hendrickson. And so that ultimately has to be their goal, is just draft defense and ride these rookie contracts and hope you get enough good guys that they can stop teams from scoring more than 35 to 40 points on you. Because we saw it last year where Joe Burrow was having to score 40, 45 points a game just to have a chance at winning. And that's not it. We saw it. Like, he had a great year last year to the point where a lot of people were calling for him to get the MVP, but the team was in such a bad position that the league wasn't going to award it to someone like that. You know, we talked about that in length in November and December. And it's shaping up right now, if the Bengals don't get this draft right, to be the same thing, where Joe Burrow is going to have to go out there and put up 40 to 50 points a game, maybe more if they lose Hendrickson and they don't have a good draft. Like, that defense could be such Swiss cheese that you might have teams like the Carolina Panthers going in there and scoring 50 points on them. It was that bad. And if that's the case, then we may see another like 4,500 yard, 35 touchdown season from Joe Burrow where the Bengals only win 6 games.
Yeah, it's we all know that the Bengals offense is going to be stacked. They're going to be unstoppable going into this year. It just there's no real question marks on that offense. It's just, if you can get this defense to just be even top 20 in the NFL, you'll be a playoff team. And at that point, you can't tell me that a Joe Burrow led offense in Cincinnati with a top 20 defense isn't a team that you can't look at and say they're a favorite for the AFC Championship game. Because if Joe Burrow has a similar season to what he did last year, which again, by all accounts, if the Bengals made the playoffs last season, Joe Burrow should have been gifted MVP. No questions about it. Yeah. And if he has another year like that and the Bengals have a top 20 defense, well, guess what, folks? Like, they will be in that conversation for the AFC Championship game. I would pick them ahead of the Ravens because I trust Joe Burrow and that offense more. Again, I maybe not pick them against the Bills or the Chiefs, for instance, but those two teams are really it. And everyone else, it's kind of just like, let's see what you can do. And
I would pick them against those teams. If they can get this defense to a point where they can hold oppositions to 28 to 30 points in that realm, Joe Burrow is going to run away with this, and they will be the AFC representative in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anybody will be able to stop them. If they can keep other teams below that 30-point mark, the Bengals are going to win every single game they play outside of the AFC North.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. But the other big thing here is we talked about it last week, why owners keep saying dumb things and hurting their teams, because, you know, with the Bengals ownership basically just saying, oh, Trey Hendrickson, he should just be happy with the deal that we gave him. And it's going like, no, that's not the approach that you give. Like, we know for years that the Bengals have always been a cheap organization. The biggest deal that they ever gave out was Joe Burrow, and again, like that was basically the league saying, "Listen, dumbasses, you
Hmm.
need to pay Joe Burrow," and they're like, "Okay," and then the league basically said to them, "Dumbasses, you need to pay Jamar Chase and T Higgins," and they
Hmm.
went, "Okay." And now Trey Hendrickson is just kind of the odd man out, it feels like. And this is a dude that 2 years ago was looking for a contract extension with the Bengals. And they said, "We want to see you give us elite production." Led the league in sacks. And then he says, "Okay, I'm back with the negotiations and I want to get a big long-term deal with you guys." And they said, "Okay, that was great, but can you do it again?"
Hmm.
And he goes, "Okay, I'm requesting a trade." They're going, "No, no, 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 no. Like we're not going to trade you. We just want to see you do it one more time to just really prove to us that we can give this deal." And he goes, "Okay, sweet. I will go lead the league in sacks yet again." And the Bengals are just like, "Yeah." Like it is the most bizarre tactic. And again, like this isn't a guy where he has Miles Garrett on the opposite side of him. Like it was Trey Hendrickson, and can anyone
Nothing else.
else name
Yep.
another Bengals defender?
Exactly.
Chances are, if you're not a Bengals fan, the answer is no.
Yep.
And to lose like that means he's getting double teamed every single play. He's getting double teamed with chips, and he's still producing that. They're just saying no. And so I honestly would not be shocked to see Trey Hendrickson get traded on draft day as a package for the Bengals to potentially try to move up and do something else and just
Yep.
try to get some more players. Because again, I will say Trey Hendrickson, he is 30 years old, so he's on the wrong side of where you want to see edge rushers, because we often see once edge rushers get to about that 32-year-old mark, unless they are like the true generational types guys, and even then we see a sharp drop off from a
Yep.
lot of these types of players. And if they want to package Trey Hendrickson to move up, I could be in favor of that, because they're going to be getting younger and they're not going to have to spend as much and they might actually get more out of it. But yeah, this Bengals team, they need to focus on defense.
Yeah. I mean that might be their only option with Trey Hendrickson because it just I don't see a deal getting done now that the edge rushing market has been reset with that new ceiling.
Yep.
I just don't see them paying him that much, and their best move would be to package him, move up in the draft this year, or even package it for some extra picks next year if that's what you got to do. Do something, but ultimately that's this Bengals team issue. They've never wanted to pay for guys. You mentioned it, they finally paid with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I think prior to that, the two guys that got the biggest contracts from the Bengals were Chad Johnson and Pac-Man Jones. And that was it. Like one guy on either side of the ball. And those contracts paled in comparison to what the rest of the league at similar positions were making anyway. Like this team is cheap. That's why they've never been successful. And they're like, hey, we'll put all our eggs in these three guys and hope for the best, but it's not gonna be enough to win. They gotta find a way. They better hope that their scout crew and their draft plan is airtight and just perfect.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see what this organization does, because again, for me, I always like to say I have my team, the Chicago Bears, and then I also like to say I have one AFC team that I can kind of look at and root for, and that team the last few years has been the Bengals. Been a big fan of Joe Burrow ever since he went to Ohio State in college, and then obviously going over to LSU. I was a fan. I was a fan and drafted number one overall. It was like, yeah, dude is going to change franchises. And I even went as far to say last year at the start of the season that Joe Burrow was not only going to be competing to be the best quarterback in the NFL, he was going to out duel Mahomes and show that he's the best quarterback in the NFL. Now that didn't come true, and Mahomes is still Mahomes, but I like Joe Burrow's that type of guy. But it's it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because if the Bengals draft an offensive player in round one, they've completely lost the plot.
Yeah, honestly, in the first 2 days,
Yeah.
if they draft any offensive player. I can understand, grabbing some extra pieces in rounds 5, 6, 7, but 1 through 4, it's got to be a defensive focal point.
Yeah.
It has to.
And I jokingly say at the start that the next 2 drafts should be all defense for the Bengals, and people go, "Oh, teams never draft just solely on one side of the ball." The first year that Matt Rule was in with the Carolina Panthers, they literally did just that. They drafted nothing but defensive players. And it was the first time that it ever happened. So yeah, it's rare, but if you're the Bengals and you look at that defense, man, to get the defensive help, like really bolster that unit and that side of the ball. Next conversation for us is where's Shedeur Sanders gonna go? We kind of talked about this a little bit a few weeks ago, that if Shedeur Sanders makes it past pick number 3, that is going to be the conversation of the draft. It's going to be, where's Shedeur going? Because if he makes it past the Giants, it's probably not going to be the Raiders. The Saints, there's some news about Derek Carr saying that he might not even play this year. So that is a big conversation. But even then, if I'm the New Orleans Saints, and I know Derek Carr is going to be out for the year, and we like Desmond Ridder, as much as they say they like Desmond Ridder, why not go with Desmond Ridder the entire season? You're going to be bad. So why try to have a guy like Shedeur Sanders come in, struggle for the entire season because the team is just bad, and then end up having the first or second pick in next year's draft with generational quarterbacks potentially up on the board?
Exactly. It wouldn't make any sense for New Orleans, especially with them talking about how much they like Ridder. If that's the case, then you run with him. If you draft another quarterback and put him into that QB1 slot ahead of him, all that does is tell the rest of the league, hey, yeah, we don't have our quarterback of the future. Because it's not like you're just drafting Ridder and then throwing him to the Wolves. He's been sitting on the bench. He played a couple of games last year. If he truly is the guy you think is for your future, you play him.
Yeah.
You play him this year. You give him the shot and you go, okay, either you surprise everybody and, hey, look, we won 7, 8 games and we're picking mid-draft, or the team's as bad as we think it's going to be and you're picking in the top 5 and you go, hey, now we saw what you're capable of. We don't believe you're the guy. Now we can draft a quarterback. Or maybe they saw enough out of him and he does well enough, but the rest of the team was so bad. They go, okay, now we know we can build around you.
It's kind of like the Titans strategy coming into this year with Will Levis, where it was a brand new offensive minded coach with a guy that, was a little bit of a later round pick. Now, Will Levis was a second round pick. Desmond Ridder was a 5th round pick, but it wasn't a premium draft spot for either of those guys when they got drafted. And it's going, I think both of us will sit back and say, if we were to look at the depth chart of the New Orleans Saints, they probably have the worst roster in football right now. Even though they were a handful record better, they just didn't make any improvements.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, they can't afford to.
Yes, that is a number one. They literally cannot afford to do anything because they've been paying off that credit card bill for the last 40 years at this point. It seems like ever since the salary cap has been in place, they've just never had money. But the point still stands of where you look at the Titans blueprint, you give this young quarterback an opportunity to play, and if he sucks, well, guess what? You'll have a pick to fix that. And if he doesn't suck, you go, maybe we might have something and we can try to run with this. Now, neither are amazing options in my opinion. I would rather know for a fact, and there's nothing to say that, for instance, Desmond Ridder under a Kellen Moore system doesn't turn into a franchise quarterback. I doubt it because I just don't think he's that good of a quarterback.
Yeah.
But it's a possibility. Some other teams that I could see being in play for Shedeur Sanders is your Pittsburgh Steelers. If he ends up falling to that 9, 10, 11 range, what's to stop the Steelers from trying to package a deal to move up? And hell, let's just say, for instance, that the Steelers are absolutely in love with Shedeur Sanders. And now even Shedeur Sanders said his meeting with the Steelers was a 10 out of 10.
Yep.
And That right there, it fixes the Steelers quarterback problem. Pick
I mean,
5 comes.
he even stated that he would be comfortable sitting a year or two behind Aaron Rodgers if that's what Pittsburgh chooses.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
said he'd be fine with that.
Which I think would be a really good thing for Shador Sanders to sit a
Right?
year.
Then at least he can learn from somebody, since we don't have anybody on the staff that's going to teach him.
Yeah, and neither of us think Mason Rudolph is necessarily a teacher of how to be a quarterback in this league. Like, he wouldn't necessarily be a bad option, but it's also looking at it going like, he's better than having another rookie on the roster or having a guy
Yeah.
that's only been in the league for a year. But again, if you had Aaron Rodgers there, you would be happy to watch Aaron Rodgers start for a year and then allow Shador Sanders. But again, if you see Shador Sanders there at pick number 5, you're not entirely sure that the Raiders aren't going to take him, and you try to package a deal up with Jacksonville to move forward, like there could be options. There could be options to go up and make that trade. Even like let's say you get to pick 10 with Chicago, and you say to Chicago, what we will do is we will package our first round pick and TJ Watt to move up to pick number 10, and you give us one of your second round picks. So it's basically a swap of first round picks, TJ Watt to the Bears, and a second round going back to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh gets that opportunity. Now, as a Chicago Bears fan, I would sit back and go, I would probably take that deal to move back from 10 to 21. And as a Steelers fan, I'd look at it and go, we're losing our best player, but it's a guy that has already showed hints that he wants to leave anyways. And he's in the final year of his contract, and it's easier for us to at least get something out of it as opposed to not.
I mean, the tough thing there is, like, that is a tremendously low value for TJ Watt.
Totally.
You know, so that's where I don't think that necessarily would be the case. I don't think the Steelers would do that. Just not for that little, because you're basically just trading him for a second round pick.
Yep.
At that point. And, you know, we know TJ Watt is worth a first rounder in this league, and I think they could get that elsewhere. I don't think TJ Watt would be part of the package. I don't think they would try to move up as far as pick 10 from 21 to get him.
Possible.
You know, especially not with the trade history between Ryan Poles and Omar Khan right now, because I think the Bears would ask for more at that point. But no, I definitely could see them looking to move up somewhere in that teens range if he's still sitting there, as long as they don't have to sell off too much for it. Like, you're obviously doing a swap of first. You know, maybe a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick, as opposed to TJ Watt, is a more realistic option to go to another team because it's final year of his deal as well. We know Pittsburgh won't re-sign him. We know wherever he goes won't re-sign him. But if you need a safety, then you plug him in for a year and you go, okay, we got someone.
Yeah, it's again, we're just throwing out hypotheticals here at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, these are teams that I just look at and I go, they're possible once we get past pick number 3 that we could see being an option for Shador Sanders. A team that I also am going to throw out there, and when I say it, it's going to be like, what are you talking about? Why would this team go this direction? But after you kind of think about it a little bit, it kind of goes like, okay, yeah, I can understand that. And to me, that's the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah.
I don't think that the Colts truly think Anthony Richardson is the guy. And again, no one thinks Daniel Jones is the guy. The Colts, they have issues on defense. They're being talked about as if Tyler Warren isn't there, it's almost going to be a lock that it's Colston Loveland, the tight end from Michigan. So it seems like they're very interested in getting a tight end, but I wouldn't rule out the possibility that if Shador Sanders is somehow there at pick number 14, that the Indianapolis Colts don't call him up and say, hey, we need a guy. We're not confident in any of our guys here at the moment. Come in, compete with these guys, and if you have to sit for a year behind one of these guys, then so be it. And it just kind of feels like the Colts are just a team that's desperate right now. They're just
Yeah.
desperate, desperate, desperate. Again, bringing in Daniel Jones for the quarterback competition, and they said it's going to be a competition. That's a sign of pure desperation on the side of the Indianapolis Colts. And when you have a desperate team, desperate teams make silly decisions, and this would be a decision that would be a shock, but one that I could still sit back and go, I could see them making it.
Yeah, it doesn't shock me as much, honestly. That was another team I was thinking I could see him landing at because you basically are. You're drafting the second best quarterback in this draft, and you're looking at him and going, okay, you're competing with the worst quarterback in the league and the second worst quarterback in the league. If you can beat both of them, then you're the starter. Simple as that. If you can't beat both of them, then you shouldn't be starting in this league yet
Yeah.
because those are the two worst options right now, and you can't beat them at the job. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised by that one at all. That's another team I had thought Shadur could end up going to if he drops that far. That's why, at that 12-13 mark, I could definitely see Pittsburgh making a move if that's who they want to go after. Because, yeah, he would be a decent fit there as well. The issue there is we talked about the Titans being a team that, great, you're going to bring in a quarterback and have your guy. You don't have anything else there. And that's kind of the issue in Indy. Yeah, they've got a great running back, and they've got a couple of wide receiver options. Outside of that, the Colts are not that great.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I just sit back and kind of look at it and go, if I was the Colts, I would go with the Bengals strategy where I would draft defense, 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 because they were an atrociously bad defensive team. Now they brought in some free agents to kind of help that, but in the first 3 rounds, I would still look at defense. And
Hmm.
as we know, as both of us know all too well, a good defense ultimately makes your team better, because even if your offense sucks, if you have a defense that can hold your opponents to under 21 points, you can have a pretty good opportunity to be competitive in most of your games, even if you have one of the worst offenses in the league. Again,
Yep.
the Bears have certainly been in that position for a lot of years. The Steelers are currently going through that the last 4 or 5 years at this point, where they've had a bottom offense but the top defense in the league. That it could be a solid strategy while they try to figure out that offense. And hell, again, this is kind of like the Saints. If your team is bad enough from quarterback play and you end up with a top 5 pick, well, guess what?
Yep.
There's gonna be like 4 or 5 quarterbacks worth drafting next year in the first round, as opposed to kind of this sort of situation. Next up,
Yeah. The Colts very much are a wild card there for sure. We don't know what they're going to do, whether they're going to go quarterback, defense. They could even opt to grab the best wide receiver available right there and give a weapon to said quarterbacks. Or, like you mentioned, they're sweet on that tight end. And so they're very much a wild card that I think if Sanders starts to slip, the Steelers will be watching and considering that team especially to try and move ahead of if they can get a package deal done without selling too much off from the rest of it.
now with all of this being said, there's nothing to say that Shador Sanders won't be the #1 pick. Now, I
No.
think that would be a shock to a lot of people, because every expert that you talk to about the quarterbacks this year has Cam Ward as the clear-cut #1. But then again, this is the Tennessee Titans. They don't do logical things, and they haven't done logical things for a lot of years. It wouldn't be a shock, but it would throw a massive wrinkle, because again, the Browns have been basically talking about how it's going to be Travis Hunter, and if it was Cam Ward there at pick, if Cam Ward's there, then it's going to be Cam Ward. But other than that, it sounds like it's going to be Travis Hunter going to the Browns. But again, Shador Sanders goes to the Titans at pick #1. That throws a wrench into this whole operation. And then it's just
Right.
a trickle down effect throughout this entire class, going like, okay, well, we know this team was interested in this. And then it just opens up so many possibilities. And it's going to make draft night really interesting if that's the case.
Yeah, that's what's wild about Shadur too is like that's a potential, and uh, there's the potential he just drops all the way to 21, and Pittsburgh just drafts him with the 21st pick.
Yeah.
Like he's one of those guys that I could honestly see even possibly slipping all the way out of the first round. Just because of the fact that once he gets past that third, a lot of teams are going to be looking at different options and going, well, if he's fallen this far already, he might still be there in the second.
Yeah, it's one of those conversations that, again, I'm just quickly pulling up the draft order here. Again, we look at the three. Again, reason why we are saying that once Shador Sanders, if he makes it past pick number 3, it really opens things up, because we know at pick 4 the Patriots aren't selecting a quarterback, the Jags aren't selecting a quarterback at 5, the Raiders could, but everything has been basically like they've essentially already announced that they're going to select Ashton Genty with pick number 6. It's been
Yep.
that kind of situation. And again, with Geno Stone or Smith getting that contract extension, that makes it a little bit more. The Jets aren't going to do it at pick number 7. They just signed Justin Fields. The Panthers aren't doing it. Again, we talk about the Saints as being an option, but as we already dictated it earlier in this conversation, it just wouldn't make sense. Bears aren't going to do it. 49ers aren't going to do it. Cowboys could do it because they're stupid, but I don't even think Jerry Jones is that senile yet that he's just going to start drafting random people. The Dolphins aren't going to do it. Again, we have that Colts as that surprise team, but even then, the odds, even if he is there, are low. Falcons aren't doing it. The Cardinals aren't doing it. The Bengals, Seahawks, Bucks, Broncos aren't doing it. It really falls down to the Steelers. And then once you get past the Steelers at 21, Chargers, Justin Herbert, Packers, Jordan Love, JJ McCarthy at 24 with the Vikings, CJ Stroud, Matthew Stafford in the Rams. That could be
Yeah.
a potential landing spot as well. But
Yeah. That is the only one in that back half that I think is a possibility, is that Rams team.
yeah, and it could get really, really interesting. And like this draft really is going to be determined, where does Shador go, because he's going to be a polarizing player. Like
Yep.
it is going to be the conversation of draft night. Now, moving forward, we don't see player trades too often come draft or during the draft, but we see maybe one or two a year. Again, we see the famous example of when AJ Brown got traded from the Titans to the Eagles. Funny enough, in that same draft, we also saw Hollywood Brown go from Baltimore to Arizona to go play and reunite with Kyler Murray. We saw that in the same draft class. And the question is, who are some players that we could see be traded during, not just on day number 1, but during this draft? Some of the names that I have kind of pinned up here are Trey Hendrickson. This is a guy that very much could be on plate to move. TJ Watt, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is that the Steelers could very easily look to package him up to move up in this draft. Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is locked in with trade conversations here at the moment. I think his options are starting to get really, really limited, especially with the Browns signing Joe Flacco again.
Yep.
Kayvon Thibodeau, the edge rusher for the Giants. I think if the Giants end up shocking people and going Abdul Carter at pick number 3, that pushes Thibodeau out, because he's not on that long-term deal. He's coming up to the end of his rookie contract, and let's be honest here, are you going to trade away Brian Burns or Kayvon Thibodeau? And the answer is going to be Thibodeau. And then you also have Breece Hall, because again, this Jets organization, I heard a report earlier this week that said the Jets are considering drafting Ashton Genty at 7 if he's still there, and putting him in a running back committee and then trading Breece Hall. And I'm sitting back going like, this is the most Jets move that I've ever heard about, because of course, why would you take away a top 10 running back in the league right now? Yes, he's coming up to the end of his contract and you're going to have to pay him, but like, you know what you have.
Yeah. I mean, it is a very Jets thing to do, but that would be wild, because even, I can't remember his name, but even the number 2 in New York with the Jets right now is a decent quarterback. Like when like that 1-2 tandem of Hall and insert name here, that they were good last year. Like they were very good. And so that would be a silly option for them. I don't think Genty will still be there. Like we discussed already, we think the Raiders are pretty sweet on him, and that is Pete Carroll's type of player. And so I don't think that'll be an option. But yeah, I mean, I could see Breece Hall being moved, whether that's the case or not. I mean, he wasn't very happy last season, and he was very vocal about it. Granted, Aaron Rodgers is gone, so maybe that sentiment has lessened, but we don't know.
Yeah, Braylon Allen was the other running back that we were thinking of, and he was a rookie last year, and he played
Right.
really, really well in a lot of certain situations. But pretty much what I've heard is that Aaron Glenn essentially wants to have a running back by committee, similar to what happened in Detroit. But then again, Breece Hall is a great running back. You don't just trade that guy away. One trade package that I did here is the Chicago Bears send pick number 72 in this draft and DeAndre Swift to the Jets for Breece Hall. And if I'm the Bears and the Jets come up with that proposal, I'm like, yes, please, now. Yeah, send it now. Do it now. Like, I wouldn't even question that move. I would be extremely happy if that happens. And I'm kind of sitting back going like, Jets, please do Jetsy type things. But yeah, it's, there are players that are going to be moved, that we could see moved. And in the case of Hendrickson and TJ Watt, it's teams trying to move up to get a certain type of player. Kirk Cousins, I don't think at this point he is going to be moved during the draft day. He's kind of got to this point where it's going to be a team, they have an injury at quarterback going into preseason, and they say, we need to try to salvage a season. And for instance, if Sam Darnold goes down, I could see them trading for him. But yeah, Kayvon Thibodeau and Breece Hall would solely be just teams making draft day moves type situation.
Yeah, and I mean Kirk Cousins, I could see that being a late day two move. If a team's like, fuck, we didn't get the quarterback we needed, we wanted, so we're gonna make this move now and get Kirk Cousins in here before somebody else swoops in. I could definitely see that. And I mean, some of the other guys I thought of too, Micah Parsons.
Yep.
We could see be on the move as well, or even Dak Prescott. So say the Cowboys do take Shadur Sanders, we could very much see them then package Dak Prescott to move back up into the first round for another player.
Yeah.
It's not outside the realm of possibility if they do something like that. So
that also opens up a lot of money for them to re-sign Micah Parsons type situation.
Yep. And I mean, another team and another guy that we haven't talked about, but has been talked about in years past about this is his last chance. This is his last chance. Kyler Murray.
Yep.
Maybe the Cardinals, maybe Shadur does fall to them. And they go, you know what? We're going to reset our quarterback and we're going to trade Kyler Murray away to the highest bidder. I mean, it would not shock me to see something like that happen either. So there are a lot of potential. But again, this is just us.
It's speculation at this point. Yeah.
Like it's whether any of it happens or not, it's 90% likely they don't happen. It's most likely that none of these happen.
Oh yeah.
But it's fun to think about. What sort of packages would be in place for guys like a TJ Watt? And maybe Pittsburgh's not even using it to move up. Maybe they look at it and they go, "This offseason was so bad for us. We have to blow it up. We're doing it late, but we have to blow it up." And so maybe they trade TJ Watt away for a package of firsts and seconds in coming years. And we see them draft a quarterback and just go, we're going to finally have a losing season.
Yeah, it's all of these guys, again, like every single season during the draft process, you'll see players get moved. It's not a crazy phenomenon. Again, like a TJ Watt move would be like the headline of the draft day. Like that's really what it would be. Trey Hendrickson would also be a pretty big move. A lot of these guys would definitely like move the needle type situation where you go like, oh, like damn, like this guy's on the move. And again, in talks with like Thibodeau, if they draft Abdul Carter, I don't know if I would see Thibodeau get traded during draft night. It would probably be like during round 2 on day 2 type situation, but like it would definitely be a move where the writing's on the wall and Thibodeau's out.
Yes.
But yeah, now going to our fifth kind of question about things that could happen during this draft process is which teams could be a surprise team to trade back into round number 1, and who would they ultimately try to select? Now, I have 4 teams on this list. All 3 out of the 4 of them are all trading back into the first round, the end of the first round, to draft a quarterback. Those teams I have are the Browns, the Giants, and the Raiders. Now, all of those 3 teams have top 6 picks, and they need quarterbacks. Again, with the Browns, if Cam Ward is there at pick number 2 somehow, the Browns will likely select Cam Ward. But if not, you could see them trying to trade back into that first round to get that 5th-year option, because when you have a 5th-year option with a quarterback, that allows you to have just that little bit longer before you have to add that long-term high expensive deal. And so all 3 of these teams could look at that and go, man, we have guys that are going to be starting for us this season. Let's get this guy to sit for a year, because at the back end of the first round, all the guys that would be drafted at the quarterback position, you want them to sit anyways. So it gives them that little bit of extra time to get that done before they get real expensive.
Yeah, 100%. I could see any of those teams trading back into the first round to grab a quarterback. I could also see a team like the Rams doing that. I know they've already got a late pick in the first round, but I could definitely see them packaging something together and trading up to have like back-to-back picks right there in the first round, so they can grab a defensive player and a quarterback. Something like that wouldn't shock me. If, things fall appropriately for Pittsburgh, it wouldn't surprise me to see them try to trade back up into the first round. If Shedeur does fall to them at 21, they could then go, okay, we got him without having to spend anything extra. Let's go spend some of these comp picks, trade away one of these players that we've got, and try to move back into the end to grab a wide receiver as well, or something like that.
Yeah, and the other team that I had written down is, funny enough, my Chicago Bears. I've heard a lot of chatter this week that the Bears, it sounds like there's no real direction of where anyone thinks that the Bears are going to go. Again, for myself, I'm saying if Will Campbell or Armin Mumbu is there at pick number 10, you have to take one of those guys. I want to be greedy with the offensive line, make it the best that it could physically be. And if one of those guys is there, but again, I wouldn't be upset with an Ashton Genty or a Tyler Warren. And then you start to talk about some of the edge rushers, the Mike Greens of the world, the Michael Williams. And I just sit back and I go, there's been so much talk about a guy like Tyler Warren. The Bears are now the current favorites to draft Tyler Warren at pick number 10. Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State. Very, very gifted player. A lot of fun to watch. Would be very dangerous in a Ben Johnson offense.
Mm-hmm.
If the Bears make that move and draft Tyler Warren, that tells me that they are really comfortable with where they've been at this offseason. But I think they could package those pick 39 and 41 to try to get back into the first round. Like, let's say Mike Green, the edge rusher out of Marshall, who by all accounts is a top 15, verging on top 10 in this draft as an edge rusher. There's been some off-field concerns with, 2 different allegations of SA against him, one when he was in high school and one when he was in college at Virginia. But the production is off the charts. Like, this guy is an insanely talented edge rusher, and if he's there at, say, like pick 28, 29, Bears look at that and go, hey, let's package 39 and 41, go up and get this guy, because that makes our edge rushing room elite. Yeah, we can be concerned about all this, but all of those allegations, again, one was in high school, one was his first year of college. If nothing has come to fruition over this period of time, chances are nothing's going to come out from it, and we need to work with him to make sure none of this stuff ever happens again. That could be a real possibility for the Bears.
Yeah. Yeah, 100% it could be. And I mean, we could even see a team that's not necessarily trading back that we could see a team trade all the way up to the early part of the draft and hold their later first round pick. Like I've looked at things with like Pittsburgh. You know, maybe Pittsburgh trades T.J. Watt in a package to say the New England Patriots with that fourth pick, and they grab that fourth pick, and then they take Abdul Carter.
Yep.
And they basically just reset T.J. Watt, and then they still have that 21st pick. Things like that. I've been looking at for Pittsburgh as well that are very, very possible.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what some teams do. And again, that actually kind of ultimately merges, our question number 4 and question number 5 and sort of these sort of situations is there could be some really interesting stuff that could happen for round number 1 in terms of trade packages. Because again, the Bengals could very easily be a team that also gets an additional first round pick for Trey Hendrickson.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, there are a lot of teams that I could see looking to move back into that first round if there's a player that they're really keen on getting. It wouldn't shock me to see some of those late round first guys wanting to trade out of the first round too. Like maybe the Bills don't want to use their first round pick this year, and so they're going to move back. Something like that. It's wild to think about what may come from some of these, because any of these teams, they have the potential for it, and they have the firepower to be able to do so. It's just who's going to be the gutsiest and take the most chances to try and turn their team around to be win now, instead of just standing where they are and hoping for the best.
Yeah, it's we know for a fact there is going to be teams trading back into the back half of the first round because it happens every single year.
Yeah.
Like again, we saw the Panthers last year trade into the first round. No, they didn't have a first round pick to begin with, but they ended up getting Xavier Legette in the first round, who was terrible as a first round wide receiver. You should not be getting like 500 yards.
Some good sound bites. When you're getting the ball thrown to you by a midget who can't see over his whole line, though, you gotta give the guy some breaks. He's just winging it up there, hoping somebody's there.
Yeah, and Lord knows that Xavier Legette and Bryce Young, they can't actually speak English to each other because they both speak 2 different languages. Kyler Murray, Bryce Young speaks English. Legette, well, he doesn't.
Right. Yeah.
He speaks deep southern Mississippi is what he speaks.
Yeah, the best comparison I've seen is that the coach's assistant from The Water Boy, the one that you cannot understand whatsoever.
Yep.
Even the coach is just like, yeah, great.
Yep.
What he said.
Pretty much. Like, get Ed Orgeron back there and try to use that as like a language barrier, and then you just realize, oh wait, now we have 2 guys we can't understand. Next conversation up here on the board for us is who could be some shocking day 1 picks. Again, every single year, there's like if you look at the draft board on draft day, like Daniel Jeremiah's top 50, you will not see picks 1 through 32 be drafted in the first round. Like, you just simply don't. For the last couple years, the Patriots have been making some reaches in the first round where you look at this guy and go, man, like this guy was on the boards for most people in round 3.
Yep.
And I'm just not using the Patriots as a broad example, but Raiders were famous for that for years and years and years and years. And you often only really see it in like picks 20 to 32. Before that, it's like you're seeing people that are pretty much firm position at that point. But yeah, some players that I think could be shocks to see on day number 1. Landon Jackson, the very large edge rusher from Arkansas. I know there are people that think that he could be a surprising first round pick. I think Cam Scatabo, the running back out of Arizona State, I think you could potentially see 4 running backs go in the first round. Like I think there's really only one guy worth drafting in the first round as a running back. But again, with the reemergence and how good this class is, there could be teams that sit back and say, we don't want to allow this guy to escape. And Cam Scatabo could be a guy that I could very easily see be a shocking first round pick. Elijah Arroyo, the tight end from Miami. Again, we talked about Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren being the top 2 guys. Arroyo has kind of been that number 3 guy ever since the combine, and he's a very, very talented tight end. And you always try to get some of those guys. Jalen Milroe, the dude accepted an invitation to go to the draft day, so he's going to be in Green Bay. If you've listened to me talk about Jalen Milroe, I wouldn't draft him in any round. He scares the shit out of me. But him getting an invitation to go to the draft and B, accepting it tells me that there's probably conversations that he could go in the later half of the first round.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah, odds are that's because a team has said that they may opt to take him, so the league wants to get him there. And him accepting that, like, I look at that and I'm like, that's a smart move, because if you get picked, you're there. And if you don't, we've seen guys in the past where they don't get picked in that first round and they're there, and it almost sparks something for them, and they end up performing better when they finally do get drafted.
Will Levis's no on that example. All that came out of that was an excellent sex tape. But
Mr. Mayonnaise.
Yeah. Dude has a cannon for an arm and also a cannon for,
Right. But I like that you mentioned Scatabo, because that was one of the top ones I was looking at. And with the Bills reaching an impasse with James Cook, Scatabo could be such a great addition to that Buffalo Bills offense. He would fit in so well with Josh Allen, and that's one that I could definitely see them reaching on in that first round to grab if he's still there right at the end.
Yeah, Cam Scatabo to me is my favorite player in this entire draft. Like this is a guy that you just look on paper about him. He's this height, he runs this fast, and you just go, man, like all of those measurables, they just don't add up to being what should be a successful running back. And then you look at his team last year in Arizona State. That's a team that went to the college football playoffs. Now it's not a 14 playoff anymore, it's 12 teams, so a lot more teams can get in there. But let me ask you this question. How many other players from Arizona State are going to be drafted this year?
Maybe one, none.
0.
Yeah.
And you start to talk about the offensive side of that. It was literally Cam Scatabo and nothing else. The dude is just an unbelievable player. He just plays with that chip on his shoulder. Now, the issue with him is going to be his durability, because he has had a lot of tread taken off the tires over his time at college, because it was essentially just, we have to give this guy the ball. He's just too damn good not to. But yeah, like I'm a big fan of him. I wouldn't take him in round 1. I'd be a little bit hesitant just because of that usage that he has. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Todd Gurley when he came out, where it was, this guy is so very clearly talented. Todd Gurley's not my pro comp for Cam Scatabo, but it's a decent comparison of just a lot of use, comes out there, plays really, really well over that rookie contract, and then after that, all of the bangs to his body just catches up. And so you might only have Scatabo for kind of the rookie deal. It's kind of like what happened with the Steelers when they drafted Peyton Wilson, the linebacker, last year, where that dude's knee is probably only going to hold up for the rookie duration of his contract, and then afterwards, who knows. But yeah, those are some of the guys that I have that would be shocks on day number 1.
Oh, 100%. But I know if Scatabo fell to that pick 42 area, and those other guys aren't there for the Bears, I know you'd love to see him go to the Bears in the second round. Another one I had that I could definitely see sneaking into that first round is Quinn Ewers. The one of the more pro-ready quarterbacks out there that people started to drop down their lists as he got injured last year and the Longhorns weren't doing as good with him. I could definitely see him creeping back up into that first round, especially if we see those teams start to trade back in to grab quarterbacks, then I could for sure see him going before a guy like Jalen Milroe myself.
Yeah, the only other quarterback that I have, I don't think Quinn Ewers is going to end up sneaking into the first round. It would definitely be a shock. I think the quarterback from Louisville, Tyler Sog, I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce his last name, but there's been a lot of chatter ever since the combine. It's going, well, this dude's 25 years old. He's going to be 26 when he enters next season, but he has a lot of experience. The biggest red flag with him is the injury concerns. He had a lot of injuries throughout college, but it sounds like he's kind of in that same boat as a Jalen Milroe, where a team would opt to try to trade into the later half of the first round to try to get that 5th-year option with him, just try to develop him that little bit more. I wouldn't be shocked. Well, okay, I shouldn't say I wouldn't be shocked. I would be shocked, but it would be one of those things where I would look back at this list and go, we kind of talked about this, so yeah.
Yeah.
Next up on our conversation, and we kind of already had a little bit of this conversation, is what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins, because we said when Kirk Cousins signed with the Falcons, that deal was probably going to come back to bite them in the ass. But that was even before they drafted Michael Penix Jr., where we all looked at the Falcons and went, that contract is definitely coming back to bite you in the ass.
I mean, they somehow managed to bite themselves in the ass.
Yeah.
Just absolutely insane. You sign that contract and then you use a top 10 pick on a rookie quarterback who's already older as well. That was so strange last year.
And then the rationale decision from what we heard from the Falcons, we're trying to do the Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love strategy of where we allow our guy to sit. But the problem is, let's say that you had Michael Penix Jr. sitting for the duration of that 4-year contract and was the backup. By the time, and you pick up that 5th-year option for him, by the time Michael Penix is your starting quarterback, he's going to be 29 years old. So you're having a guy who would be 29 years old before seeing proper NFL action. Again, I sat back and said it was the stupidest move of the draft. Because I didn't think Michael Penix was worth a 1st-round pick, let alone a top 10 pick, let alone a top 8 pick, but just from all the other moves that they did. But Michael Penix is going to be the starting quarterback for the Falcons moving forward. And that leaves you with this situation with Kirk Cousins. He's already stated he doesn't want to be a backup. So where does he go? And as you and I discussed, he might be a really good option for the Titans. I look at that and go, if you draft Cam Ward, you look at it and you go, man, we would just love to send maybe like a 5th-round pick to the Falcons and say, hey, get us this guy. He comes in. He's the starting quarterback for the early stages of the year. We'll see where Cam Ward is developing, and he takes over. Maybe Kirk Cousins is the starting quarterback all year next year for the Titans. As you and I have discussed, neither of us think even with a guy like Cam Ward, even if he has a historic rookie season, that it's not going to be enough to make this Titans team a playoff team.
No.
And so you might as well have him learn from a veteran like a Kirk Cousins. But after that, I look at it and go, you're not going to see him get traded probably until training camp. And again, like we discussed it, like let's say Seattle has Sam Darnold go down and Seattle just goes, well, we have to figure out something. We need this, and that to have our quarterback situation. And they get desperate and they trade for him. But yeah, it's... To me, Kirk Cousins, the situation there is almost a worse situation than what Aaron Rodgers is having to deal with, because at least Aaron Rodgers, he can sign at any given point, and a team will make that a fairly easy deal. With Kirk Cousins, you have to give up draft capital.
And eat a massive contract.
Yep. Now,
yeah,
I do...
It's a tough one. I really think the only options for Kirk Cousins is going to be as we see quarterback injuries happen. If a guy like Baker Mayfield goes down, then he's going to Tampa Bay. Even though that's a division rival, they would pay for it. If Bryce Young goes down, CJ Stroud, any of these guys take an injury.
Justin Fields.
I was just going to say Justin Fields, like there's a lot of options out there. I think the only other thing the Falcons can do is if they offer up that deal and are like, we will retain the salary,
We'll retain 50% of the salary type
right,
situation.
to
And
move on from him, or they're going to have a situation like the Denver Broncos where they just cut him and then he can sign with anybody for the league minimum and still be making bank playing
yeah,
somewhere for the minimum.
and like there's no good option for the Falcons with this move, because if you trade him and like there's going to be no one in the league that says we're 100% going to take this contract. It's going to be, we're going to give you a 4th round pick for you to retain half of this salary and for us to just take him off of your hands. Like it makes it a little bit easier for both sides at that point, but it's still bad. And if they cut him, well, then you just have a historic amount of dead money, like what we saw with the Broncos. It
Like I,
it's
I know there was talk that the Cleveland Browns were trying to get a package put together for him,
Yep,
especially with them talking about taking Travis Hunter. Then they're like, okay, we got a wide receiver, we're going to get a veteran quarterback. But really, if they weren't willing to roll with a guy like Jameis Winston, who last year was very serviceable
yep.
and can put up good numbers with a good wide receiver, why would you go to Kirk Cousins, who is much more injury prone? You
Especially
know,
when you
it,
can sign Joe Flacco for pennies on the dollar.
well, exactly. Like I don't know. And I don't see a team like Pittsburgh making a trade for Kirk Cousins. They would definitely be the top landing spot if the Falcons opted to cut him. I
Yep,
could definitely see them going, oh, look, it's Russell Wilson 2.0 for us. League minimum, you're still technically making 40 plus million this year,
yep.
just not from us. And you can be the starter. That's really it. But yeah, I think you're right. The Titans are probably the best option because they could bring him in. They could potentially drop that pick down by going, hey, we're going to send you Will Levis as well to be your backup. So then you've got a backup on your roster still. You don't have to draft one. And then they can roll with Kirk Cousins with the bad team while Cam Ward learns behind, a knowledgeable, good quarterback. Like
Yeah.
it's not like he's a bad quarterback. He's done good things everywhere he's gone. He's not elite, but he is very intelligent. And so to be able to teach Cam Ward, and then if Cam Ward progresses quickly, I wouldn't be shocked for the Titans to go, okay, Cam's the starter. 3 of these teams have injured quarterbacks. We're going to move Kirk Cousins yet again to somewhere else now and get that draft pick back from them that we spent.
Yeah, and potentially even more if you have, because again, injured
If he
quarterback
plays
teams
well.
are desperate. Again, we saw
Yeah.
Sam Bradford get traded from the Eagles to the Vikings for a 1st round pick. Like that's something that happened when Teddy Bridgewater ended up getting hurt all those years ago. But speaking of quarterbacks, our next question that we're kind of talking about is how many quarterbacks are going to go in round 1? Because we've talked a lot about Cam Ward and Shador Sanders. We've even talked a bunch about Jalen Milroe.
Mhm.
But the over under that the betting markets currently have for the amount of quarterbacks selected in round 1 is set at 2.5. So both of us clearly think that Jackson Dart is going to be a 1st round quarterback.
Yeah.
I would be willing to bet there's going to be 4 quarterbacks taken in the 1st round this year. You're going to see the 2. I still think Shador Sanders is going to be a top 10 pick. I think it would be pretty unlikely that he ends up falling outside of that realm. And then at pick 21, if Jackson Dart is there and the Steelers still don't have an option, I've been saying it for the last little bit. I look at a team like the Rams. If Jackson Dart is still on the board,
Oh yeah.
you can pencil him, or you should pencil him in to the Rams, because you need to think future for that. And again, having that 5th-year option. Then we talked about the teams that could potentially try to trade up to get one of these guys. So I actually think 4 is a pretty solid number to kind of look at and go, this is a real possibility.
Yeah, I think 3 for sure. And then 4 if we do see somebody trade back up into that 1st round for a quarterback. But I do think that Shadur Sanders, Cam Ward, and Jackson Dart all go because, I agree with you completely. If Pittsburgh doesn't take Jackson Dart, then he will be an LA Ram.
Yeah, it's been one of those situations where it is there could be some high question marks being talked about how many go. We could see upwards of 5. Like again, like I said, we have the 3 guys that we're all pretty confident are going to go. But again, guys like Jalen Milrow, Tyler Sugg or Sog, however you pronounce his last name. Apologies for me not exactly knowing that. But again, from what we said coming into this off season, where it was, man, there's really only one guy worth taking in the first round, but we know there's probably going to be 2. And then with how much Jackson Dart has been impressing people and moving up the boards, going like, okay. And then you just have the silliness from teams that going, yeah, we are definitely the organization that can take Anthony Richardson 2.0 in Jalen Milrow and turn him into a stud.
Yep, 100%.
Next question that we have is, there are still 4 big time names that are free agents, and where are they going to go? And the 4 guys that I have listed here are Keenan Allen, wide receiver, Amari Cooper, wide receiver, Matthew Judon, edge rusher, and the guard of Brandon Sheriff. None of these guys are going to be signed before the draft. It's a similar situation from what we see with Aaron Rodgers. All 4 of these guys would eliminate a comp pick that you would receive from losing such and such player. And with these guys, especially with the 2 wide receivers in Amari Cooper and Keenan Allen, because they're not young guys anymore. They're not going to be getting the money that they probably want. And it's going to be a situation of where you see a team that needs a wide receiver and are hoping to get a wide receiver in the draft. They look at one of these guys later and go, man, we didn't get the guy that we wanted, so we'll bring this guy in. Like, again, I look at the Steelers again as a team that could be very in on a guy like Amari Cooper. Again, a veteran to kind of hopefully look at DK Metcalf and George Pickens and go, fellas, in and out, deep breath. Let's not fight every single corner that we have to go up against, because you're getting us amount of penalties like that. That's a situation I could see. And you look at a team or a player like Matthew Judon. This is a team that misses out on an edge rusher. Bring this guy in as that veteran presence that's going to be a solid rotation guy. And Brandon Sheriff, if you don't get an offensive guard that you really like in this draft and you have some holes, this is a guy that comes in as a really, really solid option.
100%. Keenan Allen is the only one that I don't think is a real question mark. I really feel like he's already talked with the Chargers, and they're like, hey, we're not going to sign you yet because we want those comp pick. And so once we're done the draft, we'll re-sign you here because they need extra wide receiver help.
Yeah.
Keenan Allen already has a relationship with Justin Herbert. I really do think he is just going to end up back with the Chargers myself. But Amari Cooper will be an interesting one because, as you mentioned, Pittsburgh Steelers, I could definitely see being an option if they get the quarterback that they think is going to be successful. Another option I could see would be the New York Giants. You know, I could see them bringing in a guy like Amari Cooper to play opposite Malik Neighbors. And so there are options out there. I wouldn't rule out Amari Cooper even going back to the Bills after the draft if the Bills don't fill out a little bit more in that wide receiver room.
Yeah, I know with Amari Cooper, I know a lot of Buffalo Bills fans were actually kind of soured on him at the end of the year. They just looked at him when he just did nothing for us when he was in a Buffalo Bills uniform. But at the same time, it would be an improvement over what you have.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before. Like when you go from one team to another mid-season, it is so hard to get into the rhythm with that team unless you are the most elite of players. And Amari Cooper is not.
Not anymore.
At one time, he was definitely argued to be in that realm. But there's a lot of places Amari Cooper could land. You know, there's the Jacksonville Jaguars, you know, the Tennessee Titans we talked about. You know, we could see him go to the Seattle Seahawks. You know, there's lots of teams out there where Amari Cooper could land. I think he's probably going to be one of the more valuable post-draft wide receiver options for a lot of the teams.
Yeah.
As far as Sheriff and Judon go, those ones are a little more on the wild card side. You know, like you said, I think it's going to be whichever team doesn't get the guard or edge rush help that they were looking for are likely to sign it. The problem is, you know, they're both going to garner pretty hefty deals. Sheriff more than Judon, obviously. Ultimately, it's too bad the Commanders did so badly by Brandon Sheriff already, because he would be a really good fit there, and they really need a guard. But I don't think there's any way, even with new ownership, that he's ever going back to that team.
Yeah,
And
I
so,
could see Sheriff being a guy that goes to a team like the Patriots, who we've been talking about them having a great offseason, but the biggest problem is that they failed to address anything on the offensive line. Yeah, they signed Morgan Moses, but Morgan Moses is closer to retirement than he is to being a top end player. Now, Brandon Sheriff is not a young man. I believe he's 34 years old going at this stage of his career, but it would be better than what you would currently have. And like with what the Patriots have done, not protecting Drake May, this would be a situation where you go, at least you're giving him some more veteran presence to hope that he doesn't get killed in year number 2. Because again, we saw what happened with CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud in year number 2, with the team failing to address some of the offensive line concerns, he went from a guy that we talked about being easily a guy that could jump into that top 5 quarterback conversation to a guy going like, man, he's a top 15 guy at the moment. And we saw what happened with Bryce Young. Bryce Young didn't, I still don't think Bryce Young had a great season last year. It was an improvement over his shit rookie season that was horrifically bad. But that offensive line in front of him, it gave him time and it got him comfortable to the point where people are like, okay, maybe the Panthers have something here.
Yep, 100%. And I mean, there's teams we've talked about and other situations we talked about. If the Steelers trade away TJ Watt, I wouldn't be surprised to see all 3 of those players sign with the Steelers. Because TJ Watt going out, you would be able to afford Sheriff, Judon, and Cooper to fill that spot. And then you shore up your O-line, you replace Watt with Judon, and you've got an extra wide receiver there. That's assuming they trade him, get their quarterback, blah, blah, blah. So I mean, there's so many places we could see some of these guys landing. It wouldn't shock me to see Sheriff go to the Jets either. Some extra O-line help just to keep
Justin Fields upright.
calm.
Yep. Yeah, and the biggest thing with all 3 of those guys, and you even adding in Keenan Allen, is I don't think you're going to have to give these guys premium top dollar, because the stage that A, their careers are at, and B, where they are at in free agency, I think you might see a Matthew Judon hoping for like a $10 million type of deal. But even then, I would look at it and go, it's probably going to be an $8 million type deal for him. I don't think Amari Cooper signs for anything more than a 10. And same thing with Keenan Allen. And then Brandon Sheriff, you could probably get him for like a $7 million a year type deal, or like, obviously it would probably be a 1-year deal in that circumstance. But it definitely makes things a lot more interesting for where these top remaining free agents are still going to go. Our final question that we kind of have here this week is, what do teams like the 49ers, the Houston Texans, and the Pittsburgh Steelers need to do in the draft to turn this offseason into a win? Because all 3 of these teams, I don't think anyone would argue that they have lost the offseason so far. And when you talk about the 49ers, they lost a bunch of their defensive stars. Again, losing Tre'Davious Ward, Hufanga, Greenlaw really hurts that defense. And you had to trade away Deebo Samuels. There's still been talks that you might trade away Brandon Ayuk. And you now have that conversation of having to sign Brock Purdy, which you talk to 100 NFL fans, you're probably going to have 100 different opinions on what the 49ers should do and what that contract should be. You talk about the Texans getting better on the offensive line. They somehow got worse. So they basically looked at their quarterback, who was the 2nd most sacked QB in football last year, and said, you're good, right? You cool? You good, G? Then there's question marks at wide receiver for that team as well. And then you look at the Steelers, who have had a win type move this offseason, but everything else, it's just been like, yeah, you traded for DK Metcalf. You also paid him $150 million. And both of us would agree, I think, that DK Metcalf is not a top 15 receiver. He's probably in the top 25, and the Steelers needed a wide receiver,
Yep.
and that definitely improves their team. But that is kind of the only thing that we're sitting back. Again, you've looked at what the Browns have done. That affects you with TJ Watt. Again, we don't know what's going to happen with Minkah Fitzpatrick and his contract. But the biggest thing is you lost both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, who you heard everyone talk about. It's going to be one of those two guys. There's no way that they don't end up re-signing one of those two guys and they end up losing both of them. And now we're just been in this carousel of talking about it every single week. And what do these teams need to do to ultimately turn these loss off season into a win?
See, and I think the team that has the least chance of succeeding at doing that is the 49ers, because they're at that point we've talked about where their window was closing and all their bills were coming due. And that's kind of what we're seeing, because you talked about all the guys they lost, and we haven't talked about their biggest piece in a while. And it, he's good to go now in Christian McCaffrey. Like, he's healthy, but we don't know if he's actually going to play football again. Like, he said his legs are feeling better, but are they football better? Like, this is a point for this team where, honestly, I think they should just reset. If they can find somebody that wants to give Brock Purdy a contract, they should trade him away, get as much as they can, start moving other players. I think they need to accept this loss and start looking towards what they could be in 5 to 6 years, because I don't think they're going to be able to succeed at the retooling process, as we call it, and be able to be a true contender in that NFC with juggernauts like the Eagles, like the Lions, like the Bears are verging on becoming. It's, there was a time where the 49ers were talked about. They are a top 2 team in the NFC year in, year out.
Top 2 team in the
It's
NFL.
becoming questionable that you can even put them in the top 5 now
Yeah.
for the NFC. And so it might be time for them to just accept their fate and take this L and see what they can get for a guy like Brock Purdy. Because I don't think signing him to a big contract in San Francisco results in them turning this around.
The problem with the 49ers is they've kind of gone the opposite way of realistically building a highly successful team. And the normal way of going about a lot of ways is once you get the quarterback in place, then you know where everything else stands and you add pieces along the way. You look at the Commanders, for instance. This is a team that they got the quarterback last year, and then they've added pieces, and you go, this team is going to be really good for the next 3 to 4 years because they have a quarterback on a really cheap deal, and they can afford to bring in some more expensive contracts. 49ers, they found all of the talent out there before they got the quarterback. And unfortunately, they have spent so many years trying to find that quarterback that all of these guys have just continued on their career. They've been great players, getting better and better and better. And you have to pay those guys because you're looking at going like, well, if we don't pay this guy, then not only are we a quarterback short, we're also a let's just say a George Kittle short or a Brandon Ayuk short. And they got really lucky with Brock Purdy. Like they hit the nail on the head with that. But the question the entirety of Brock Purdy's career has been, is it Brock Purdy or is it a Kyle Shanahan making him look better while also having an all-star team out there in front of him?
Yeah, and I think you and I are both on this the side of that second option where it's mostly Kyle Shanahan and having an elite offense and supporting cast to help Brock Purdy. We've talked about it in the past where we feel like you could put any other quarterback into that Kyle Shanahan system. You could put Daniel Jones into that Kyle Shanahan system. And I think Daniel Jones is successful. That is how good Kyle Shanahan is at making sure his offense runs smoothly. And that is high praise for Kyle Shanahan. I have that I believe to be true. You could put anybody in there. So they could trade away Brock Purdy, and draft one of these quarterbacks this year. They might have a year of growing pains, but again, they don't have that supporting cast anymore.
Yeah.
You've got Brandon Ayuk. You've got George Kittle still, but he's getting older. You've got Christian McCaffrey, who we don't know what he's going to be like next year. That's why I think that they need to just close the window themselves and accept that it's time to approach this rebuild and try again, because they came so close this time.
Twice.
It was so close, but it just was a little bit too late. It was like 2 seasons too late getting that quarterback in place.
Yeah.
And it's starting to fall apart on them now.
Yeah, it's really, really unfortunate for them. And
it is. The other two teams, I think, have a clearer path to turning this offseason around. The Texans, I think, have the easiest, honestly. You know, we know what their primary need is. They need to find a way to move up in this draft to grab one of the top tier guards in the first round, or offensive lineman, period.
Yeah.
In the first round. If
there's not a single O lineman that the Texans have on their roster right now that you look at and go, this is a guy that you look at and go, we are really, really happy with this O lineman. Like, essentially, the Texans, they need 5 new starting O linemen. They basically looked at what the Bears did and said, the Bears know they need 4 offensive linemen to come in and be replaced, and they're going to get most of that done. The Texans on the opposite side were like, we need also 4 offensive linemen, and then we're going to trade away the best offensive lineman that we have.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that for them, it has to be much like we talked about the Bengals drafting all defense in the first 2 days. I think the Texans just have to go all offensive line in those first 2 days of the draft. Try to get 2 studs out of the 4 or 5 picks you're able to get through maneuvering trades and getting moving up further. And then maybe they are the team that makes the play on Brandon Sheriff as well. So if you can get 2 good O linemen out of that and then bring Brandon Sheriff in as well, then you've got 3 out of 5. And that
puts you in a much better spot.
It's going to help CJ Stroud, but it's also going to help that run game. You know, and that is a big thing. If they can shift that focus to the run game a little bit more, that bodes well for this Texans team, because then they can go and, like I said, grab Sheriff, grab Amari Cooper, and go, okay, there, we got a weapon, we got protection. I think that is the clear-cut path for the Texans to find a way to win this offseason and take it away from a loss.
Yeah, and again, with the Steelers, it's you're going to have a loss on this offseason no matter what if you do not figure out this quarterback scenario. It doesn't matter if you draft the best defensive, let's say Mason Graham somehow has a video posted of him on draft day of him smoking a bong out of a gas mask like we saw with Laramie Tunsil. If they get Mason Graham at pick 21, it's still going to be considered a loss, because you're looking at going like, okay, so you're going into next week with Mason Rudolph as your start. Oh, don't worry, we're going to sign Aaron Rodgers. Okay, well, what's your plan for after Aaron Rodgers and all of this and that? And even then, what's going to happen with TJ Watt and all the other guys? So none of these teams have easy paths to get there. Again, going back to the 49ers, their entire draft process is going to be essentially replacing guys they lost. Like with pick number 11, there's a good chance they pick the top corner in the class. In their second round, they're likely going to be in a position to draft a linebacker. And then they're also going to be looking for a safety at some point. Basically just taking the 3 big guys that they lost on defense and trying to fill those shoes with rookie contracts. Now, the 49ers have been a really good team at drafting in the middle to late stages of the rounds. So I'm a little bit less worried that they are going to be able to bring in guys and develop them properly, because they have a track record of doing it well. Again, it's still a very long shot to replace 3 All-Pros.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that is very much a team I could see at that 11 pick. The Steelers looking to make a deal with if Shadur Sanders drops to there, which would allow the 49ers to gain some extra picks and allow the Steelers to get that quarterback.
Yes.
You know, that would be a win-win for both of these teams working together to try and claw their way out of this. Because, yeah, like you said about the Steelers, I think that the only way they turn this to a win is to have perfect luck and get every draft pick right through their first 4 picks. That's the first rounder, the 2 third rounders, and the 4th rounder. Like
Yeah.
they've got to get those perfect, and it has to include a starting quarterback in either Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, and then some excellent pieces. But they also have to get an extension to TJ Watt during this offseason for it to become a win. You know, the only other option I see is for them to, as I mentioned at the top of this show today, accept their fate, accept the L, like I said about the 49ers, and go, we are rebuilding. We're trading TJ Watt around away for a first rounder next year, a first rounder the year after. We're trading Minkah Fitzpatrick away for a package of 2nd and 4th rounders to a team. We're trading away X, Y, and Z. We're getting rid of everybody who is over the age of 28, and we are resetting and restarting and hoping for the best. We're going to let Mason Rudolph do what he does next year and, you know, throw some racial slurs out at the wrong guys and get hit in the head with helmets. And then we're going to try and hopefully draft a Manning. That, like, they need perfection and luck to win this offseason, or they need to just look at it and go, maybe we try to win next season.
Yeah, it's... I think if the Steelers end up trading away TJ Watt, no matter what the draft compensation they get back, this season is a loss. Like, it is a complete... Like, the offseason is a loss.
I mean, he is legitimately the only reason that the Pittsburgh Steelers have not had a losing season since Ben Roethlisberger retired.
Yeah, well, even the last few years when Ben Roethlisberger was still there.
Yeah, since he was drafted, basically. Since 2018.
Yep.
He is the reason this team has not had a losing record. Because we've seen when he has those injury years, when he doesn't play, I think they've won a total of two games.
Yeah, it's something like 2 or 3 games. It's shockingly low. It's just absurd to possibly think about. But those are the 10 questions that we ultimately had coming into this draft process. Again, we're 2 weeks out from the NFL draft kicking off in Green Bay, and it's going to be very, very close. I don't know if next week is the last podcast before the draft. I'll have to double check that, but it is.
I think so. Because, I mean, by the time this airs, it'll be 10 Monday. Days out from the draft.
Yeah. So
next comes out on Mondays, and so it'll be 10 days until the draft from that point, because it is the week after Easter long weekend.
Correct.
When we have the drafts, so it is coming up quick. So we've got one more next week, and then it's
draft time.
Brendan here riding live throughout the draft and having fun while I'm stuck at work and hoping to God my Steelers find some way to do something.
You'll be texting into the show all the time, so
crying while sorting through the tears.
You'll be texting in, so yeah. We'll have you on that one. But yeah, next week it's gonna be my final mock draft before the draft actually kicks off. But that is it for us here today, guys. Thank you all very much for watching. For Sterling, I'm Brendan, saying peace.